Rohatsu Friday, the fourth full day of 2025 Rohatsu, partial residential Sesshin at Sangajul, our first residential, so that's very nice. And everybody is really into it. Everybody is really chugging along, giving it their best, wholehearted effort. Keep it up. If you start to slack, notice that. Put some more energy into it. You know, we've got like 2.5 days left, and that's a long time in Sesshin. So keep going. Keep going. One bright pearl. Some years after attaining the way, Zhuan Sha instructed his students, saying, "The whole world in the 10 directions is one bright pearl." Once a monk asked him, "I heard you say that the whole world in the 10 directions is one bright pearl. How should I understand this?" You know, possibly the monk was asking Zhuan Sha for an explanation. But I don't think that's what it was, because the culture in 9th century China, Chan practice, they were pretty averse to giving intellectual talks, as you can probably tell from all the koans. I mean, and Dogen's writing, it's just like poetical, these illusions that, you know, are in many ways baffling to us in 21st century America, you know. So, you know, I really don't believe he was saying, you know, how should I understand this? Please explain it to me. You know, I don't think that's what he was saying. It seems more likely to me that he was kind of prodding his teacher to give him another clue, another pointer to what he meant by, what he was getting at with his imagery of the one bright pearl. Hey, give me a clue so I might be able to penetrate or really, you know, get into what it is that you're pointing at. And we've all been trying to get into what he's been pointing at, haven't we? There's 16 of us. We have 16 different ways to try and penetrate or understand, as the student said, how should I understand that? How have you been trying to understand it? Everybody's been writing and underlining and taking a look at what appeals or draws to them and writing about that. I started working with One Bright Pearl a couple of weeks ago after Mushin and I talked about this fascicle being the focus. I was in Cannon Beach that week, and you know, at first I was looking for some kind of physical manifestation of one bright pearl, some kind of literal, interpretation or some kind of understanding. That's often how I start working with koan, or with puzzling Dharma explanations, like so often we find in Dogen, for example. First thing I do is how does this show up in the real world? Do I experience this in my life? Where do I see this? And and at first I was kind of imagining or feeling like this sphere that was, reflecting everything. Sort of similar to Indra's net, which is also a metaphor, not something that we actually see literally in the world, but we can gain that understanding that everything is reflected. And sometimes I get, try to get a little body sensation. Oh, let's see, I feel like maybe I'm sitting on a big pearl, some big sphere, concentrating on my breathing in the tent, and it's like, is there a big pearl in my guts, or is there like a grain of sand that's going to turn into a pearl, like an oyster does? That was, I didn't get real far with all that. But then I was walking on the beach one sunny day, and gosh, it was so much like one bright pearl, I mean, the sun was shining and, glittering on the ocean, and, there were fluffy clouds up above, and birds flying around, and the rocks, and the mountains, and the forest coming right down, and these ocean rocks, and the sand, and everything was so, just sort of bright and beautiful. And it's like Dogen says, how beautiful are the colors of the bright pearl, and that's what it was like out there on the beach. Everything bright and clear, and everything depending on everything else, I mean, the waves were coming, they're dependent on the winds and the moon, and the clouds were up in the sky, they depend on the sun evaporating the ocean, and the birds are flying around, and they dive down in the water to eat fish, and it's like everything was all happening together and dependent upon everything else. It was really quite beautiful. And Dogen says in this fascicle, how lovely is one bright pearl's infinite colors and shades. Bits and pieces of its colors and shades express the entire world of the 10 directions. And, really, all those colors and shades, they are the entire world in the 10 directions. The entire world in the 10 directions is the bright pearl's colors and shades and flowing and, interaction. It's all working together, I studied ecology for a while and worked in that, and so this thing about everything works together and everything's dependent on everything else, it just seems so reasonable if you've looked at ecosystems at all, So then a few days ago, Sunday service, I gave a Dharma talk that included some references to Buddha seeing the morning star, and Koan Eijo Zenji, Dogen's successor, evoking the treasury of luminosity. Dogen's successor wrote this fascicle we've been chanting, this chant we've been chanting in the Kamyozo Zanman. And it dawned on me that attention and gratitude are also big parts of seeing the one bright pearl in all the 10 directions. And it's similar to the golden radiance that Dogen talks about in another fascicle. And he says, you should learn to see the golden radiance in the world every day. Sometime every day. Just be aware of the golden radiance. The richness constantly radiating everywhere. The constantly emerging. So my feeling that gratitude and appreciation was part of seeing the one bright pearl everywhere. It followed on me attending the Generosity Sesshin in early November that Joman led, and some of you might have been there. Yeah, were you? No, okay. It's been on my mind a lot since then. Not only because I talked about it a little bit, but also because we are in the giving and receiving season now. So there's a lot going on with giving and gratitude and appreciation. But this carryover from the Generosity Sesshin to what I'm working on with One Bright Pearl, like the generosity and the gratitude coming in, it's something that happens for me, from time to time. Like when I clarify something about the Dharma, like the Generosity Sesshin was really opened up this whole appreciation for gratitude and generosity. And when something like that becomes more real for me, some Dharma teaching, it kind of oozes over, seeps into other thing, the next thing that I might be studying, And so, thinking about the One Bright Pearl, it's like, I am so grateful that there's one bright pearl. Thank you, Bright Pearl, for being in the world and being part of my life. Thank you. And in this One Bright Pearl view, this golden radiance view, everything reflects everything else, right? Everything receives from everything. We all receive from each other and from everything. Everything gives to everything else. The whole world in the 10 direction, a bright pearl, a transparent jewel, as Mushin talked about. It's a treasure, the whole world. And, it's usually unrecognized. It's usually unrecognized in the thick fog of self-preoccupation, which is one reason why we practice. So that fog can thin out a bit, and we can see the treasure. The monk asked Zhuangxia, the entire world in the 10 directions is one bright pearl. How should I understand this? So, coming from a perspective, he's asking, how can I approach this? I mean, what can I do to figure this out and have it become real for me? And Dogen generously offers advice in a number of points in this fascicle about moving towards understanding the One Bright Pearl. In one place he says, turn the light inward and illuminate yourself. How many ways do you understand that? How many ways do you understand this? There's probably a lot of ways to understand turning the light inward and illuminating yourself. Those are words, and they can be interpreted in many ways. And with Dogen, there is very rarely one way to interpret something, or one way to talk about something, or think about something, or understand something. There's rarely only one way to get at something. He turns things around. He's so masterful in, turning them backwards and turning them upside down, turning them inside out, and saying the same, using the same words in real different ways. And what he wants us to break out of some fixed view or some fixed understanding, by like puzzling us. It's kind of like, every sentence in Dogen is a koan. It's meant to like shatter our rational thinking in some way. Turn the light inward and illuminate yourself. How many ways do you understand this? Dogen also encourages the student-teacher relationship in the quest for understanding. He says, teacher and student turn their heads and exchange their faces, unroll the great matter, and harmonize their understanding. Student and teacher unroll the great matter, opening up questions of life and death together, and harmonize their understanding together. This is such a treasure in our tradition, to have a direct relationship with a teacher that is encouraged to happen regularly, often. I don't think there's very many traditions that encourage, or almost, that's the teacher-student relationship is such a foundational aspect of insight and understanding in our path. And not just in 9th century China, not just in 13th century Japan, but even now, teacher and student can harmonize their understanding and unroll the great matter. The Dogen continues in his encouragement of how do I understand this? He says, because you take initiative, you do more than distantly see the essential matter. The essential matter. Because you take initiative, don't just wait to be told by someone who can explain it or write it in a book. You want to find out for yourself. Looking at it. Boring into it, drilling into it. Understanding emerges from diligent effort, like the effort that Zhuangxia undertook when he left his beautiful floating world on the river with his boats and his fish, and he went into the mountains, to the monastery, to do this hard work of sitting in zazen, hours on end. Like the diligent effort Dogen undertook when he left Japan, took this hazardous voyage to China and moved around there and studied for 4 years in order to get true understanding, which he was not finding with his teachers at home. We don't necessarily have to quit our jobs and travel all over the world in order to find understanding. But taking initiative, diligent effort is needed. The kind of diligent effort you've all been putting in these last days. That's initiative. And the kind of effort that you all do working with teachers. You all work with a teacher. This is initiative. Some people don't come and do Sanzen. Some of the members and some of the participants don't come and do Sanzen, but you all come and do Sanzen. That's like, okay, I want to get going. I want to keep going. Another way Dogen encourages us as a way towards understanding, how do I understand this? He encourages us to recognize our limited views and go beyond them. Saying in this fascicle, although you may say, I'm not a bright pearl, you shouldn't doubt. Whether you doubt it or not, such doubt comes from a limited view. And limited views are merely limited. I mean, Dogen's just saying it straight there. This is not like puzzling poetical metaphors. He's just saying, you're looking at it from a limited view, and limited views are limited. But he says, when you clarify the body and mind as the bright pearl through the Dharma words of Zhuan Sa, you understand that mind is not the self. Yeah, that takes like getting outside of the limited view, right? What is mind? What is self? Maybe self isn't all there is. Although you may say, I am not a bright pearl, you should not doubt, Dogen says, generously assuring us, we are a bright pearl. The whole world in the 10 directions is a bright pearl, including each of us, including our friends in the Zundo. And Dogen assures us that when we clarify that, you understand the mind is not the self. The mind is so much more inclusive than the self. When the monk asks Zhuan Sha, how should I understand this? Zhuan Sha seems to give him a pointer, saying, the entire world of the 10 directions is one bright pearl. What do you do with your understanding? Monk wants to know how I understand it. And Zhuan Sha says, okay, let me ask you from a different angle. What do you do with understanding? What do you do with your insight, with your wisdom, with your knowing, with your awakening? What's needed to be done, and what understanding about the one bright pearl might be acted on? What do you do? This is action, you know? It's like samatha bhadra. It reminds me of the last of the 5 remembrances. My deeds are my closest companions. I'm the beneficiary of my deeds. My deeds are the ground on which I stand. Do, act. It also brings to mind the 2nd and 3rd of the 3 pure precepts. Do good. Do good for others. It's not talk about good. It's not imagine good. It's not writing about good. It's not preaching about good. It's doing good. And it brings to mind Shanti Deva's way of the Bodhisattva. I rejoice in the virtue of all beings to help attain the way. I offer any virtue that I have. Understanding is a virtue. Wisdom is a virtue of Manjushri, you know. Offering the understanding that is gained from penetrating the one bright pearl. What do you do with that? The next day, Zhuangxia asked the monk, the entire world of the 10 directions is one bright pearl. How do you understand this? The monk said, the entire world in the 10 directions is one bright pearl. What do you do with your understanding? It's like just repeating each other. You know? Zhuangxia said, you know, this is interesting. Zhuangxia didn't say, you're just mimicking me. He said, I see that you've worked out a way to get through the demon's cave on the Black Mountain. I mean, this is an affirmation of what the monk's response was. And I don't, you know, this was the next day after Zhuangxia said, what do you do with your understanding? The next day the monk, he had this interaction, right? That monk is a fast learner, you know? I don't get it that fast. That guy was on it. You know, he gets he gives a reply to Zhuangxia, affirming his understanding using his own words. It's just, but it seems like the monk is echoing him, but Zhuangxia still accepts his statement. And we can't know from 1,000 years later in a writing, you know. There's so much more richness in the face-to-face that goes on. I mean, he may have said it in some way. He may have, you know, he may have winked with one eye. He may have waved his arms around or something. We don't know what happened, but Zhuangxia said, I see you've worked out a way to get through the demon's cave on the Black Mountain. Whoa. I find the Demon's Cave on the Black Mountain to be kind of a startling image, especially in the context of, you know, this, you know, exchange about this fascinating image of the one bright pearl and its beautiful shining colors, and, you know, how it illuminates everything so wonderfully, you know. And it feels like, you know, the Demon's Cave on the Black Mountain, it's like the opposite, you know, of the one bright pearl, you know. It's like something terrible you want to never encounter. Instead of a white one bright pearl, it's like a treasure that you just can't wait, you know, to understand. But, you know, Dogen assures us in this fascicle, it's just that the entire world of the 10 directions is one bright pearl, not 2 or 3. It's not wonderful bright pearl sometimes and a terrible black pearl in the demon's cave in the Black Mountain some other times. It's like Mushin has explained. It's all part of it, you know. All of the, you know, all of the hard things and the beautiful things are part of the bright pearl. Yeah, so I was curious about this imagery of the Demon's Cave in the Black Mountain, and I thought, well, maybe this is some kind of classic Chinese poetical imagery that was used in, you know, 9th century China or whatever, but I didn't find that that was the case. I really couldn't find any other quotes except for the Zhuangxia story, the one bright pearl story. but I did find some other commentaries about it, and like many poetical images, it's subject to multiple interpretations, and it works on different levels, right? And they're not necessarily mutually exclusive at all. So one understanding is about the demon's cave being the mind, or more specifically, the self. Because as Dogen writes, when you clarify the body and mind as the bright pearl through the Dharma words of Zhuangzi, you understand that mind is not the self. But until that is clarified, our life seems to be self, mind seems to be self. And, our life of the self with our, fears and desires and delusions over and over again, we get dragged around by our mind, ourself, from one problem to another, from one misery to another misery. And it can feel very much like being in the demon's cave in the Black Mountain over and over again. And fortunately, Dogen has given us some guidance in the Genjo Koan about maybe trying to get out of the demon's cave of the self. He says, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. And thankfully we have Zazen practice, in which fear, desires and delusion, greed, anger and ignorance, they just keep floating up in front of us, our own self, all these aspects of ourself, they just keep floating up for us, and we can just, there they are, we can study those. We can question our assumptions. We can question our reactivity. We can question our limited view, our belief systems, what we think is true. And gradually we can learn to set some of that stuff aside. Get it out of the way, so maybe we can see the bright pearl, maybe we can see the golden radiance. But it takes a lot of practice. Like Chosen's book calls it, training a wild elephant. We can't just say, okay, mind, go sit down, be quiet. That might have been part of what Zhuangzi meant when he said to the monk, I see you've worked out a way to get through the demon's cave in the Black Mountain. Maybe Dogen thought as much when he said, when you clarify the body and mind as a bright pearl through the Dharma words of Zhuangzi, you understand that the mind is not the self. The mind is not the self. So another view of the demon's cave in the Black Mountain is that of it being the world of samsara, right? This world of suffering and delusion, where we live and work with others, with all of our ups and downs, all life's ups and downs, joys and sorrows, sickness and age, separation, death, the 8 worldly winds that Nushin describes, success and failure, joy and sorrow, the continuous stream of cause and effect, which if we don't have some understanding about, just sweeps us along from one crisis to another. Dogen commented that Not ignoring cause and effect from beginning to end is the face of the bright pearl, the eye of the bright pearl. Questioning, facing what's happening. Not ignoring is an action. It's something the monk can do with his action, with his understanding of the bright pearl, something we can do with our understanding of the bright pearl. Choosing to see the ceaseless flow of cause and effect, of impermanence, and to live in it, to live with it, to tolerate it, and to thrive, and to help others understand it and live with it in this world of samsara, of suffering. A third view of the demon's cave in the Black Mountain is it being the hell realm where Jizo Bodhisattva, in their great courage and everlasting optimism, goes down to help suffering beings. Jizo Bodhisattva being a archetype for parts of our own character. This is Shantideva's "Everything I have, I joyfully surrender to help others attain the way." This is the Dalai Lama's "So then may I too abide, to dispel the misery of the world, the misery of the demon's cave, the misery of samsara." This is really having worked out a way to get through the demon's cave in the Black Mountain. Dogen ends the one bright pearl fascicle with, "Therefore, forward or back, your every step in the demon's cave on the Black Mountain is one bright pearl. You might go from the sunny beach, it's a pearl, into the hell realms, but it's all one bright pearl. Whether it's the demon's cave of the self-delusion, self-suffering, the demon's cave of the world of samsara, which we traverse with our friends and companions, or the demon's cave of the deepest hell realm entered into to save suffering beings. Your every step in working out a way to get through the demon's cave in the Black Mountain is one bright pearl. May we all have the courage and the wisdom to see the demon's caves in our own lives as bits and pieces of the colors and shade of the one bright pearl, and be able to work out a way to get through the demon's cave in the Black Mountain for ourselves and for all others. And please keep chugging along these next couple of days. Please wholeheartedly continue your Rohatsu Sesshin practice.